We're rolling.
All right, hey, welcome to the first of the 3 review sessions I'm going to have for our test on Monday. 7, 8, 9 test, remember, for this Monday. And right now I'm going to do the first part review session for Chapter 7, Articles and the Constitution. Again, you can always, read your book is probably the first and foremost importance of success, but use this as a secondary aid. You can always find me at room 7080, periods 4, 7, and 8. You could follow us on Twitter at Mazuka21. You could, we're there. All right, we're there for your 8 push needs. But I want to start out right now with Articles of Confederation review. Remember, it was adapted or ratified in 1781. It was used as model after Franklin's Albany Plan. The main hang-up over ratification was Western lands, what to do with those Western lands, since many states had claimed that. So once it came to an agreement that the Western, or what was going to be known as the Northwest Territories, once that was given up and it would be controlled by the federal government, then the Articles of Confederation were drafted. Again, Articles of Confederation 1781 to 1789, and the number one problem, or the number one issue during the Confederation period, has to deal with the economy or finances, because the powers of the central government under the Articles restricted the central government the ability to tax, and that lied with the states. So make sure that you go over that in your Tindall. Again, Jefferson said the Articles of Confederation, the best government ever, because that really was the most democratic. Each state was really in charge of their own affairs. So what powers did the Congress have under the Articles? Well, they had the controlled foreign policy, Postal Service, standards of weights and measures, admitted new states, which is probably going to be the key one, because those are the Northwest Ordinances. More on that later, of course. Managed Indian affairs and maintained an army and a navy. Now, the issue with the Northwest Territory. Thomas Jefferson proposed this be under the guide of the central government, and becomes known as the Ordinances of 1784, 1785, 1787. So the Ordinance of 1784, Jefferson formulates a land policy that requires how these new territories will become a state. Land Ordinance of 1785 divided the Northwest Territory into townships with a section reserved for public schools. Right? That was mandatory, because he believed that that's the future of this nation will depend on a literate society. Land was sold at $1 an acre, a deal, but you had to buy it in 640 acre at a time. So the goal was that this land would pay off the public debt. So the 640 acres is the minimum that anyone can buy, and this kind of helped out speculators, because they can purchase large tracts of land at a relatively cheap price, then of course sold at a later time at a higher price. That's the game here in America. Buy low, sell high. Northwest Ordinance of 1787 establishes how these territories will become states. It said that this land would be between 3 and 5 states. Each state could have its own legislature once the male adult population reaches 5,000. And of course, once there are 60,000 people there, then they could of course apply for statehood and write their own state constitution. And there was, of course, a Bill of Rights that went with that, with the guaranteed freedoms that we'll see later on in the ratification of the Constitution. The big problem, like I said, was the Depression. So the 1780s, a lot like the 2000s that we are in right now, we are mired in an economic situation. There was a depression suffered by most states because of the loss of trade. We have soldiers not getting paid from the Revolutionary War. A great example of that was the Newburgh Conspiracy. Is when a group of soldiers in New York were protesting against Congress, and they proposed a military threat to get congressional change. They wanted, of course, they wanted to get paid, and this does not ever come to fruition, basically because Washington is able to put down the conspiracy, but this is a glaring problem that the federal government could not pay off its debt, did not have the ability. So the Newburgh Conspiracy is a great example of that. The other glaring example is, of course, Shays' Rebellion. And that takes place in western Massachusetts when, in 1786 and 1787, when indebted farmers in western Massachusetts was looking for financial relief from the Massachusetts government, state legislator, and they were not getting any federal, or they weren't not getting any state relief, and the federal government was powerless to do anything. And so they took up arms against the government or the state militia of Massachusetts, and the rebellion was eventually put down, but this was a glaring example of the inability of the Articles government to really control the economy. There was not a lot of paper currency out there, and so there was a shortage of it, and that was an issue, and the Articles government could not address it. So in 1786, Annapolis Convention in Maryland was a convention with delegates from only about 5 states, and they wanted to get together to address the issues of the Articles, the weaknesses of the Articles, and the goal was to revise them. And since there were only 5 states represented, they wanted to reconvene in Philadelphia, and in May of 1787, the Philadelphia Convention, or Constitutional Convention, initially was there to revise the Articles. That does not happen. They actually come up with a brand new Constitution. And the issue was, of course, with this new Constitution, powers of the central government had to get expanded. And the Confederates were very leery of having a strong central government like England, and so they had to come up with a series of compromises where you have 3 branches, and Congress is going to have a 2-branch House. In Madison's proposal, his Virginia plan, we're going to have a bicameral Congress based on population and based on equality, and this. So the population will be based on, or the House of Representatives will be based on the population, which would favor the North, and the Senate would have 2 from each state, which would benefit the South. We're starting to see little seeds of sectionalism growing right here. Now, I said the Constitution was based on compromises. The South wanted the slave population to be counted as state population to get more House of Representative members, and so they settled on a 3/5 compromise, which of course, for every 5 slaves, would count as 3 people towards the population, and therefore to bolster their House of Representative numbers. And so the compromise was struck, and so now we have a government with 3 branches, and a stronger central government with the power to tax, and now it's up to the states to ratify this. And a series of essays written by Hamilton, mainly Hamilton and James Madison, known as the Federalist Papers, of course, were written to promote the ratification of the Constitution. So if you were for the ratification of the Constitution, you were called a Federalist. If you were against the ratification of the Constitution, you were an anti-Federalist. And one of the glaring omissions was a Bill of Rights. And so states demanded that there were Bill of Rights giving guaranteed individual rights. And this, of course, will be passed in 1789, and after the 9th state ratifies this new Constitution, it becomes law. And in 1789, we have a change of government from the Articles of Confederation to, of course, the Constitution, which part of it is the election of a first president, and the nation will unanimously choose General George Washington out of, he hails from Mount Vernon, Virginia. He will come and much to his reluctancy will accept the nomination for the first presidency of the United States. And he will begin his first term in 1789, and that will be discussed in the Chapter 8 review. Take care.